you can bring in your presentation that is on the bottom side of the screen. Thank you so much. We also have important advances here in Chile. We talk about the quantification of the greenhouse gases and the challenge that this means for the Chilean livestock. That is why we hope that the next presentation will be very interesting for you. In charge of Francisco Cal, who is in charge of the Livestock Investigation Institute. He has to do with sustainability and environment from the National Institute, INIA. He was the regional director of the area in Chile, and he was also the president of the meat corporation. He has worked with the scientific research of the greenhouse gas effect. And so we're going to leave with you with Dr. Salazar and what he's going to talk about greenhouse gases and mitigation measures towards carbon neutral livestock systems in Chile. Thank you, Veronica, for the presentation and for the invitation to be able to share some information about how we are in our country and what we are doing with this outlook of being a neutral carbon, what we have decided for 2015. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope that your health is good in this very complex time. First of all, I want to tell you, as the Agriculture Institute, which is one of the most important here in Chile for the agriculture, we are more focused on the cattle. When we talk about the environment, about more than 25 years, we've had a very strong work in this issue, and where we have been incorporating, when we talk about the gas emissions, greenhouse emissions, and also ammonia. And we have also been involved, as Veronica has mentioned, we are part of the team which is generating the national stock, the national inventory. And we have also worked in the carbon footprint and the water footprint, which has to do with producing meat and milk. A little bit to produce in our national, we are very well linked with countries who are ahead of us with this kind of information. And doing this kind of research not only allows us to do the research, but also to be able to see on the global. First of all, in definitions, we talk about the presentation is to put under context the information that we have of our country, to take out the noises that there exists, and what we are talking about of different things. First of all, we talk about the carbon footprint, and sometimes we confuse it with the balance. The carbon footprint is how much does a productive system emit in a farm, for instance, of the greenhouse effect divided by the kilos produced, the kilos of meat produced. Obviously, when we have a higher production of meat, we have a less carbon footprint. The difference of the carbon balance, where you're making a sum and the division between the difference between the absorbed carbon dioxide. So we see how much emits, but how much the system can be capturing through the pasturing systems or the forests that are present. And finally, when we talk about the inventory, you maybe have talked about the inventory of the greenhouse gas effect. And what we do is to quantify for different production systems with a standard methodology. In the governmental panel of 2016, taking all the gases that we have in the greenhouse, which take it to an equivalent, and we see how much it was. In our country, when we talk about the greenhouse gas effect, we only have 0.26 of how much we are emitting globally. But however, we are a country who are very vulnerable due to our geographical, we have the mountains, we have sea, we have the desert. It generates that we are very sensitive to the vulnerability to the climate. So we need to be careful about this. And we have seen this through the climate changes that has occurred in the last years, the difference of the long droughts or very heavy rain or extreme conditions which could be occurring. So the country needs to adapt to this. And this is what we are working on, not only in the mitigation on one side to try to reduce the gas emissions, but also when we talk about adaptation. The country had as a goal to reduce 30% of the emissions at 2030, having 2017 as our starting point, and to have a neutral point at 2050. And these measures that we pretend to do to be able to do this, one of these is to at least to reforest 200,000 more hectares of forests. And what we have done in our country, when we talk about the greenhouse gases, we have generated 6 inventories starting from 2000, and the last one was 1990 to 2018. We have quantified how much we are emitting in the different production sectors. We have published this internationally. Also, we have generated documents for the international to say what we are going to do as a country to reduce the gas emissions. Also, we have a national system which we are working on. The adoption of this, one of this is the agriculture, and for the law of climate change, we are also working with it a long term for the climate change strategy. Many things we are doing this thematic of the climate change, which has to do with the emissions of the greenhouse gases. This is also very important to say that we know that this intensive production on the left-hand side, you can see very extensive, which very typical of our pasturing systems, where mainly we are producing the meat in the south of Chile, with a lot of contribution from the forests, which gives us very particular situations and very special for the meat production and the livestock, especially in the south of Chile. On the other hand, we have very intensive, not only in our country, but also outside of our country, where we have some feedlots or confinement, where normally the emissions are very high and the possibility of capturing these emissions is very low because of the big concentrations of these areas. This is a international outlook. These are data which has been reported by the FAO. And you can see in this figure everything that has to do with emissions of the cattle area, where you see a big contribution of the southern cone, emissions of the livestock. And this was given because the big from Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, and what we are contributing to the emissions. And on the other hand, everything that has to do with Asia, with a lot of production of porcine, of pork, which is also generating emissions. And this last time, we have putting a lot of emphasis of discussion about the importance and the emissions of the livestock area, and they are responsibility to the climate change. But I think also we have to put everything under context. Everything has already been said by the previous speakers. What is occurring in the world? The consumer has a very important responsibility. We cannot think of a world only eating vegetables. There are studies which is pointing out that if you eliminate all of the animal productions in the world, either way, we would have emissions. It would not be zero what is occurring, because obviously to feed everybody with vegetables is not feasible, because we would need some macro elements, mining elements, things that are present in the meat. As our grandmother says, we need to eat everything a little bit, or eat well. And this consumer has a high responsibility, is that a lot of food today is eliminated. And this is from the point of view, not only in the production and the processing and sales or storing. There are some elements which are being produced which have a high cost to produce. The efforts that we need to do this. So I think that each one of us have a responsibility, and we also have to have it as a criteria of conversation in everything that we are talking about. Taking it to the global, this is a summary created by the climate change, the FAO stats, which are the emissions. I want to point out that the area which is most causing the greenhouse is the energy with 35%, and the agriculture, which is the afolu that you see, is 24%. The fermentage, we're talking about the animals, the cows, is an important percentage when we talk about the wastes. The greenhouse gases are mainly generated by the fermentation of but under the context of a sector which is the second importance around the world, and this has to do with the generating of this. Another important source is the synthetic fertilization, farming rice, and how we handle this sewage. At the level of our country, the levels are much more high, around 77% of the emissions. We are a country where the agriculture is only generating 10.5% of the greenhouse gases. And this is what we have seen in the green color. And this is what has been occurring since the 90s that we have registered until 2018. We have been increasing the emissions, so therefore we need to try to reduce this. So we need to have mitigation measures. But here I want to emphasize that the agriculture area only is generating 10.5% of the greenhouse emissions in our country. Now, if we put on the other side of what you can see in the green bars that are going down, this is the forestry area, and this is capturing the emissions. And the line, the black line, is the country's balance. We have a neutral carbon for many, many years until 96, and then we begin to emit more than we are capturing. So finally, in 2018, we are emitting a whole lot more, much more than we are capturing. But we have a high potential of capturing through the forests, through the presence of production systems that can be capturing the carbon. Also, I want to highlight with this slide what has happened in 2017. You can see a high decrease in the forestry area. And when we talk about capturing, is because there was a huge forest fire in 2017. Many hectares were burned, and the high impact of this was generating the greenhouse gases, which was equivalent to 5 years of what the agriculture is producing. Just that forest fire, due to a human carelessness, caused this. So this is to put it under context of what we're talking about. In the agriculture area, something that I have already mentioned, the enteric fermentation, what we see in our country. The second place would be the soil, the agriculture soil, when we talk about the fertilizers that we are using, and also how we handle the wastes. If you look at this, of how we can focus these efforts, this is where we need to put our biggest focus to be able to emit these gases. And we're also seeing this in the other parts. This has taken us to a regional scale. Here I put the country, if you can see it laying down, to see the different regions from the north to the south. You can see the north is on the left-hand side and the south is on the right-hand side. If we just go to the livestock area, in the southern region is where we have the most gases that are being due to the livestock, but under a context of 10.5% of the gases that are being emitted in our country. The central side, we see the pork production. You can see that this is an important effect of the greenhouse gases. Now, we can do the inventory of our country since we have such a difference in our climate. We can see this on the regional scale, and the colors, we take it to the national scales. And here you can see the good news that there are some regions, especially in the south of Chile, starting from the Araucanía, Aysén, and Magallanes, they are capturing the carbon that they are emitting. Everything that we are producing, we talk about emissions, is less than what we are capturing through our forests that we are handling. which are inside in the emissions. If you look at the northern side, especially in the very far north, due to the mining industry with a high use of energy and no forests, we are emitting more than we are capturing. And this is not to be a competition between the regions, but these are good news that we are generating this kind of information, which allows us to say that we are neutral carbon in many of the regions of our country. In fact, we have capturing more carbon than we are emitting. Now, I wanted to put this chart of the gas emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions in the milk farms and the dairy farms in New Zealand. This was done in the AgriSearch, and which is showing as we reduce the emissions of the greenhouse gases, or in the case of the carbon footprint, increases this. Not necessarily, but the measures that we are doing the mitigation means a higher costs. There are many measures which are focused, which has to do with the production efficiency at each farm level, and production efficiency means to reduce the gas emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, or to reduce the carbon footprint. And this has been occurring in the country in the last years. We have higher produce of milk and less numbers of animals. That means we are being a whole lot more efficient in producing with the resources that we have. When we talk about the mitigation measures, this is a work that was done by the Global Research Alliance, also with the other institutes, where we are seeing a series of technology that are being used in different scales when we talk about how to handle the pastures, how to handle the wastes, things that we still are trying to discover. When we talk about studies of concepts and etc. What I want to highlight here, I'm not going to talk about each one of this, but I'm going to say that many of these are associated to handling. If you can see all of the animal health, how the animal health has affected the gas emissions, it does affect it. A cow that is not producing can produce a disease. That means I'm emitting a lot of gases, and this animal will not or have a high mortality or very long production cycle, or my pastures are in very poor quality, I'm emitting more gases. So there's a lot we can do when we talk about improving the productive efficiency, but also what has to do with capturing the carbon with the forests, the use of inhibitors and other technologies that are available today to be able to have a better livestock. I have already mentioned that what has been occurring in our country is the constant reduction of the population of our cows, but obviously this is a good, but it has reduced the gas emissions. To reduce it and have high production, we are being much more efficient. This has happened in our dairy cows and our meat cows strongly in the last years, and also in the export. When we see that 3,500 live calves are being exported, but I also calculated we see 33 kilograms of carbon is leaving also. So we are also exporting CO2. There's also a series, not only in our country, but around the world, a series of new technologies to make more efficiency of the nitrogen. There are some inhibitors of the ammonium, of nitrification, and emissions of the greenhouse gases, as you can see here on the slide. Inside the alternative palettes that we have. Here, I wanted to show you more in detail. We have some molecules that are being used as a commercial use of the fertilizers. One of them, we should have it in his workplace, in his fertilization plan during the time, which is very hot, for instance, the use of inhibitors of the ammonia, and very rainy seasons, we should have the inhibitors of the nitrification so we do not lose the nitrogen by using these different inhibitors. everything that has to do with how we handle the waste when we have combined systems of the meat systems or the dairy systems, the purines, the gasification of the purines. These are things that we can do. And today of new technologies, I can see a drone that's not far away of being used, using this technology that is being used to do fertilization that is very, very specific, associated to the demographic, the fertilization in the soil, so we can do better planning of what we are doing on our farms to be able to reduce these greenhouse gases. When we talk about the feed, but our colleagues who have been working on this, there have been great advances. Not too long ago, there wasn't anything that we could use in the feed. This compound, which is the 3-NOP, which has allowed an average, which is something that was published not too long ago in 2021, to reduce the emissions of methane in the animals at a 22%. In the case of the dairy cows, up to 41%. Also, the use of nitrate has also allowed 14% of the emission of methane. There's another compound that is being used, and they are trying it, and very promising, like the use of the red algae, of the tannins, fumaric acid, essential oils, and extractions of different vegetative products, which is trying to inhibit or capture the emissions of methane in the animals. So therefore, this can produce the same amount of meat, but reducing the emissions. When we talk about capturing the carbon, we're talking about the potential that our pastures can have. What we need to do is still have more data of what is the content of carbon on our soil and how we are capturing the carbon in our pasturing systems and our forests. We are working with a project together with the meat corporation, Fedileche, Fedicarne, Fedimeat, and quantifying the production or the balance of the carbon in our pasturing systems. These are our typical pasturing systems here in the south, where we see the high presence of trees that can be capturing the carbon, and also the pastures. But we're talking about permanent pasturing. When we are talking about capturing carbon, an effective capturing our carbon, to be able to prove it, they have to be mastering that has been under the same handling in the last 20 years. We're talking about long time pastures, not just every once in a while pastures, and make sure that this carbon is staying. This is also being seen in other countries, how we have taken strongly the carbon in the soil, a second outlook in Scotland and Ireland and other countries around the world. In Europe, this strong issue, because it's very important. The graph is showing you how we increase the carbon. This is also, it increases the amount of carbon. It's been stabilized. It's the fact that it cannot capture more in the soil, but there is an important period of accumulation in the first 50 years where they have an important capturing. So if we break a soil and we put it as a pasture, then it will begin to capture the soil. And as long as we have it, more carbon it's going to be able to capture. We have been doing some the research and development. We have been working strongly with the public and private sectors in the agriculture, creating information, training in the Latin American areas. We are very happy to be able to contribute in this. We have been working in need of the agreement of clean production and also in the national inventory of the greenhouse gas effect. And many of the producers, we were having work out in the field to see what are the good practices that they can do to be able to reduce the emission, to do a more efficient agriculture and a livestock production with low emissions. This has been thanks to the work that INEA has been doing, strongly associated with these research alliance, which we have been calibrating this network, and we have done some research in the livestock and the gas emissions. So we have seen the advances that there are in other countries. We have been tightly in touch with other countries and with institutions within our countries, especially with the meat associations, to see how we're going to do a more sustainable handling with our livestock. There are some research projects that we have online right now. I want to highlight these 5 projects. There are more, but these projects of the carbon balance with the root sheet for generating productive systems with the neutral carbon, to be able to see and quantify at the farm level what is occurring. With this national inventory, we have a commune outlook. What we want to do is to see the methodology at the farm level and quantify how much we are emitting and how much we are capturing. This is a very detailed level, and we have been working on this. We were working with forestry institutes. We've been working very strong with our forests. We're also working in Latin American countries when we talk about the ryegrasses and the international, which has to do with the data, where we are getting some national data and the mitigating measures that we are doing for the handling of the data. As a final comments, to be able to close, I think that there is a big pressure of the environment and the social areas about our animal production systems. And here I want to give the information that we have today. So with this information, to be able to have a very good discussion of what we are doing or not doing, what we can do. But it's very important to know what are the emissions, to see what mitigation measures we can do that we can integrate in our production systems. Some have already been mentioned. When I'm talking about integral, not only should we talk about what happened with the greenhouse gases, but we also need to think about the nitrogen from the animals, because it could be some mitigation measures are very good for reducing methane, but at the end of the balance or the trade-off that we're talking about in the livestock can also be contaminating. There is a potential of capturing the carbon, especially the use of the forests. We have optimal production for the livestock. We have forests, we have trees, something that you don't see in all of the countries. We have a very important pasturing system. The farmers have a very good, according to our national statistics, we have 20% of forests inside of the farms, and this is a very important contribution of capturing. We have everything of the new agriculture. We're talking about the precision agriculture and the use of drones that we need to use today. The climatology is also very important to see what are the conditions and to have an efficient use of our resources and to project what we are doing. And we can have a spring, a summer, fall, and winter inside the same season. So what is going to occur and how to apply the purines or the fertilization, we have to see. We have to be very conscious of what is happening. Also, we have some additives that we can put in our animal feed, new formulas for the fertilizations and the use of inhibitors. And also this collaboration of public-private is very, very important, and how we have been associated, how these production chains are associated. We all have to be going in the same direction, and we can see how that this is very important. Here we have research for everyone. It's a very broad subject. We can all contribute, but we also need to be organized, and we also need to be pointing in the same direction. And something that is very important, we talk about the Global Research Alliance and to have take advantage. We're so proud of having Scotland with us today. They're showing what they are doing, that we also have in other countries like Uruguay, Argentina, that have similar situations like ours. This is my presentation. I'm very attentive of the questions, and I'm so proud of this. We ought to acknowledge those who have supported us, and also of our associations inside of us and of our team for the environment and livestock teams. Thank you so much, Salazar, for your presentation. It has been very complete. We have some questions. Are you interested in researching the regenerative? We're talking about the holistic production. Enia, we are doing some research in this, especially in the Magallanes region, in the 12th region. Yes, we need to look at all of the systems, and this system is one of them. Thank you so much. Another question. What are the expectations that you can see of all the current research projects that you are doing in the Enia with the finances from, we don't want the expectation to be very high, but we think that there are good expectations. What we have been seeing, and we are very highly linked with the doctors, we have been taking the data, and the truth, we have a great presence of forests in the farms to be able to high potential of capturing the carbon. I say a high potential of capturing because the forests need to be handled as a concept to be able to quantify them inside the capturing. And we need to know what is the potential that each one of these forest productions have and what are the best trees, individual trees in capturing the carbon. Maybe we could be close to 0.2. That would be ideal. But if not, we will be very close to this. Thank you so much. This is very important. The regions and the areas where we have more forests are the ones where we have the main number of livestock in our country. So I think they are very encouraging words. And I want to highlight that the subject that you are doing is very, very important, even though they have not had yet an official numbers. As I've been mentioning throughout my presentation, what we are doing in our country, we are reporting over half an hectare of the forestry, because this is the capacity that we have in analysis of the data that we have in our national. These are handled forests. These forests that we have on the farms, what do we need to do to be able to know exactly what is the capturing, how we need to handle them, how we need to use them, how we can put them inside of our components of our resources. The good news is that we have them. They're there. We have seen them. We've seen them on the farms in a very important way. So I think that this is a huge potential versus other production systems that are very intense in other parts of the world. Do you think the capturing of the pastures without any kind of intervention? Yes. A very good pasture, a very nice pasture will be emitting CO2, but a handled pasture through the use of fertilization have a very high potential of capturing the carbon. The higher growth that the pasturing has, obviously it will be able to capture more. And this is something that we still have to do. We need to generate our local information, and we need to prove that our pastures will be used for more longer years. We have gone into a dynamic of interrupting our pasturings, and we need to try to keep our pastures with a high production pasturing, but for longer time, and evaluate the ones that we have that we are using as rotation, how that throughout the years we are breaking in, how we are capturing through a more longer time. Thank you so much. Sincerely, we want to thank this intervention, because all of these series of work and the way that you have done and what we see in the future is based on a very serious measuring, and we can count on this with these numbers that we can present in a very calm way with the transparent information and updated information. So we want to thank you so much to Dr. Salazar for being with us in our seminar. And we want to say goodbye and just for a few minutes to be able